Our question today is from a Knowledge Shop member in Epping, New South Wales. A husband and wife have a self-managed super fund. Both draw minimum pension. She is 65 years old and he is 61. She recently passed away. Can the husband continue to draw down her pension, or does he have to pay out her pension? Across to you, Garth.
This is a question that we actually are getting a lot over the help desk of late, and probably more so due to the ageing population of our SMSF client base. There are a number of considerations before we even get into the payment itself. The first thing that we need to think about are the rules set out in the SIS legislation and the SIS regulations around death benefits and what needs to happen. So the regulation itself sets out that a death benefit from super must be cashed. That cashing could be by way of a lump sum or a pension or a combination of both of those. So a mere journal entry from one member to the other member within the accumulation phase won't work. We need to have a cashing event. We then need to look at the trust deed of the fund to see how the rules of that fund then work with the legislation. How does a deed allow benefits to be paid, and how does it allow death benefits to be paid? Some deeds allow a death benefit to be paid as a lump sum. Some deeds allow it to be paid as a pension. Let's take a look at a couple of examples of some wordings used in some very common trust deeds. This first deed sets out that if a member was to die, that benefit can be paid in the form of a lump sum or pension in accordance with the trust deed rules. So this deed would allow that death benefit to be paid as a death benefit pension. In another deed, which you can see on your screen now, you will see that on the death of a member, the form of benefit for the death benefit can be by way of pension, lump sum or other. Again, allowing that trustee to make a decision on the form of the death benefit payment. In regards to the reversionary beneficiary nominations, you'll see that this particular deed sets out that on the death of the primary beneficiary of a pension, that pension may be transferred to the reversionary beneficiary on the death of the initial recipient. Once we've got that worked out, I would then take a step back and have a look at how the existing pension for that deceased was established. And what I mean by that was there a reversionary beneficiary attached to that pension? Are there binding death nominations within the fund that we need to take into account? And once we've got that information, we can then move forward to work out how we need to deal with that death benefit. So let's start by saying that the pension itself was not established as a reversionary pension. It wasn't. And we'll assume that there was no death benefit nomination. Based on that, the trustees would usually have a discretion as to how that death benefit will be paid. Again, by way of lump sum or by way of a pension. Now, because it's a non-reversionary pension, we're going to refer to this as a new death benefit pension. So the deceased pension would stop on their date of death. It would essentially revert to accumulation phase. The trustees then make a decision to pay that death benefit by way of a pension, a death benefit pension to the recipient. It's a brand new pension. The minimum pension on this non-reversionary pension doesn't necessarily need to be met in the year prior to death of the first member. The new pension would then start, and the minimum for the remainder of that year, prorated, would be paid to the new death benefit recipient. So that's for a non-reversionary pension. If the pension of the deceased was initially set up as a reversionary pension, the outcomes are actually quite different. The pension would not cease on the death of the initial recipient. It would actually continue past their death and automatically revert to the nominated reversionary beneficiary. Again, based on the wording of the trust deed and based on the wording of the pension document. Just making sure that both of those documents do align with each other. If that's the case, the minimum pension for that whole year, so from the start date of the pension or 1 July up until 30th June, must be met with payments made either to the deceased prior to their death or with benefits and pension payments paid to the reversionary beneficiary after the death of the initial recipient. So we need to make sure that minimum is met across that whole financial year. If not, we can have issues with the pension standards. So there's some issues that we need to think about under the current laws. There's also now some things we also need to take into consideration under the super reform measures, so post 1 July 2017. Everything we've covered up until now is relevant, of course, up until 30th of June 17. There are just some small changes that we do need to keep in mind when advising clients on benefits from 1 July 17. The first one, of course, is the new 1.6 million pension balance transfer cap. The limit imposed on the amount of money our clients can move into the tax-concessed area of retirement phase, into pension. And of course, we know that from 1 July, that will be limited to $1.6 million. So the catch here is that if there is a reversionary pension in place, when that person passes away and that reverts to the spouse, in most cases, that pension balance will now get caught under the recipient spouse, the surviving spouse's 1.6 million balance transfer cap, which could create some issues. Now, the legislators have given us a 12-month period, in most cases, to actually make that decision. So in most cases, 12 months from the death of the initial recipient, to work out what we want to do with that pension, whether we want to commute it or take it as a lump sum. 12-month period will go very quickly, so we need to make sure that we're onto that. So remember, as soon as that 12 months is up, it can create an excess balance transfer issue for the new recipient. And there could be some nasty tax outcomes that we need to think about. The other thing quickly to think about there, post 30th of June or from 1 July, is the trust deed wording. Some trust deeds aren't written in a way that will help you manage these 1 July 17 changes. So for instance, around these reversionary nominations, there could be new wording introduced into deeds, which most very good deed providers already have, which will help us manage this $1.6 million cap. Essentially, when the event occurs on death, there is a decision which is made at that time. So we don't have an excess balance transfer cap issue. So it is certainly worth reviewing your trust deeds, particularly for your pension clients, to make sure the wording aligns with the new rules. The last point, just quickly, it's in line with the query which has been asked, but it actually relates to transition to retirement pensions post 1 July. Just keep in mind that under the current rules as they've been written, which come into place from 1 July, so the current legislation for the new rules won't actually allow reversionary nominations for transition to retirement pensions. So TTRs, transition to retirement pensions, aren't really retirement income phase pensions under the new rules, and we can't actually have reversionary nominations for them. That doesn't mean we can't still access them as death benefits, because remember, the death of the initial recipient will create an unrestricted non-preserved benefit in the fund. So that the surviving spouse, based on the wording of the trust deed, could even elect to take that as a new death benefit pension, exactly as we covered in the first part of today's question.